He drinks on the air.
He has a little sip of cognac now and then, but...
Live from North Texas, it's Wednesday night! So for tonight's edition of Drunk Rankings, I have spent the last couple of weeks drunk tweeting all of the Saturday Night Live movies. Every movie based on a Saturday Night Live sketch. That's over on my Twitter, @Matt_presents, if you want to get in for next time. I've also brought back the big old bottle of wine, because I think it's just funnier to see, like, this full bottle and just watch it slowly disappear. This is a full bottle. I haven't taken a sip out of it yet. So, cheers. Are my headphones still on? Yeah, they are. This is a weird thing about my camera app. If I have my headphones connected, I can hear the things I'm saying through the camera app. Okay, we're back. Seems turning off my headphones royally fucked with my camera app. That's fine. We got it figured out early enough. We're not even on to the first movie yet. This one was a lot of fun. Saturday Night Live movies run the gambit from excellent to some of the worst trash you will see. So, this one has like a much broader range of quality than most of the franchises I have looked at. So, without further ado, let's get into it. The worst Saturday Night Live movie.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
I am accepting the fact that I have the worst SNL movie. I am owning having the worst SNL movie.
I have a movie out. Stuart Saves His Family. Some people like it, but, you know, a lot of people do, but it's not a big hit. Kind of a box office disaster.
So, Stuart Smalley is one of the two characters who got a movie that I was unfamiliar with before I watched the movie. The other being Tim Robbins' Ladies' Man. Granted, I had heard I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me before. I just didn't know what it was a reference to. So when it popped up in this film, I'm like, oh, okay, the people are referencing Saturday Night Live when they say that. Okay, that checks out. So, Stuart Smalley's thing, apart from sounding kinda gay, it was the 90s, so just the guy doing a lispy voice, that was enough. That was peak comedy in the 90s. What an awful decade. Not as bad as the 2000s. The 2000s were worse, but still, what an awful decade. So his thing apart from that is that he's like way too into self-help stuff. Like he's like addicted to self-help stuff. Like he's got like 5 different sponsors for different anonymous organizations that help him out through the movie. He starts off, you know, with a TV program, and then he kind of gets fired, and then later he kind of gets the show back. It's a whole thing. Honestly, a lot of these Saturday Night Live movies feel very similar to Wayne's World, because so many of them end up with their own shows, either on public access or on public radio. So it's like, I don't know, it feels like they saw the success of Wayne's World and they're like, okay, every SNL movie has to have them getting their own show. Even if it's a character who didn't have their own show in the sketches. Pat gets her own show, their own show, in It's Pat. We'll get to that one. So Stuart Smalley, I believe Stuart Smalley did have his own show in the SNL sketches, though. So, checks out, I guess. They had no ideas for this movie. It's like, I mean, first off, I don't even know what you do with what you're supposed to do with a Stuart Smalley movie, like how, but at the same time, like, why would this be the plot that you went with? So, the bulk of the plot, for what of it there is, because this movie is a tad aimless. It does kind of meander from thing to theme, but the meat, the one recurring plot thread is that Stuart's great aunt, I believe, has died, and she left behind this big estate, but her house is technically 2 inches onto the property of her neighbor. And so they have to settle that dispute with the neighbor. And it's Stuart's job. Stuart has to do it, and he has to help his family who's falling apart because all of them are terrible people, including Stuart. Everyone in this movie fucking sucks. That's why it gets lower ranking than It's Pat. In It's Pat, only Pat sucks. In Stuart Saves His Family, everyone sucks. I can't even say, like, the jokes are bad, because there's no jokes! Like, there are so few jokes in this movie. It is utterly lacking in even attempted comedic content. Like, it's a comedy. It's a comedy. Put more funny stuff in. There's a Ted Raimi cameo. That I thought was worth noting. I wrote it down when it happened. I'm like, hey, Ted Raimi. It's just about one of the only interesting parts of this movie. Ted Raimi's in it. Also, this is the first of many movies I will be talking about here that takes place in Chicago. Like, a surprisingly high number of the movies based on Saturday Night Live, the show famously shot in New York City, most of the movies take place in Chicago. Blues Brothers, that kind of makes sense. Wayne's World, I think they're technically in the suburbs of Chicago, but then this, It's Pat, and I believe also The Ladies' Man are all set in Chicago. Oh, and Wayne's World 2, and Blues Brothers 2000, although Blues Brothers 2000 is kind of a road trip movie. They go all over the country, but it starts in Chicago. Out of 11 movies, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that take place in Chicago. Over half the Saturday Night Live movies take place in Chicago. That's my Saturday Night Live movies are set in Chicago rant, because I have so precious little to say about Stuart Saves His Family. It's the hardest to find of all the SNL movies. They don't even have it on Netflix DVD, and Netflix DVD has fucking everything. Yes, I am one of the 10 people still subscribed to Netflix DVD. I love it. It has so many obscure movies that you can't find anywhere else. But I think that's only an appeal to me, because I watch some really obscure shit. Stuart Saves His Family. It's the worst SNL movie. Not by much, but it is decidedly the worst. It's not fun or interesting. There's not that many jokes. The plot is really weird and not very interesting. Moving on.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
It's Pat, one of the most infamous movies of all time. I know a lot of people who claim this is like the worst movie ever made, and here I am saying it's not even the worst SNL movie. Stuart Saves His Family is just that tiny bit worse. Now, the big problem with It's Pat is I hate Pat. Pat is a terrible character. She's a terrible human being. They're a terrible human being. Listen, I'm several drinks in. Pat is played by a woman. I am going to call Pat she. That's just a fact of the matter. Technically, we never learn what Pat's gender is. That's the joke of Pat, that, like, no one can tell what gender they are. Now, I think a lot of people would be like, ugh, you couldn't do that today, and to be fair, I think the studio would be too scared to do that today. The producers, the network executives who run Saturday Night Live would be like, we don't want to have to deal with the backlash to that. And to be fair, someone will find it offensive. That's just the nature of the internet, especially when you're talking about something as sensitive as gender. But, speaking as a closeted non-binary person myself, I don't think there's much in the sketches that wouldn't play well today. Maybe the theme song raises some issues, because the lyrics are, man or a sir, is it him or her, or whatever it might be. It is going to cause some issues there. But other than that, I think most of the Pat sketches are fine. 'Cause honestly, the idea of, you know, cishets bending over backwards to try to figure out someone's gender instead of just asking them is an idea that has become even more relevant in modern times, I think. But going back to the movie, the thing I hate about it is that Pat is just not an enjoyable character. They're one of those shitty people who doesn't realize they're being a shitty person, because they're trying to do it like, haha, all in fun, you and I are buddies, but it like, totally misreading the situation every single time. Very obnoxious person. I have dealt with some Pats, and I've never enjoyed my time with them.
I've contracted a horrible disease, and I've been told I don't have much time to live. What should I do?
Why don't you just call 1-800-WAH-WAH-WAH-WAH-WAH?
I could certainly see some people getting offended at the fact that the androgynous character in this film is a shitty person, A, and is also pretty gross. Is depicted as pretty gross throughout the film. Now, granted, to counter this, you have Pat's partner, Chris. And Chris is a pretty sympathetic character. Played here by Dave Foley. I think Chris had 2 or 3 actors in the sketches, but played in the movie by Dave Foley, who does a great job with the role. Jesus fuck, I gotta turn the air conditioner on. I am sweating up a storm. I am too drunk for it to be this hot. They do a little joke in there that might work in a more clever movie, but just kind of makes this movie worse. Where, like, Pat and Chris meet, and they're like, ooh, we're getting along, we have so much in common thing, and it's all, like, really boring, basic stuff. You know, like, Chris is like, oh, I love dinner, and Pat's like, me too, dinner is one of my favorite meals, and then one of them's like, you know, I really hate people dying, and it's like, whoa, I also hate people dying. So, this could be a good joke in a better movie, but the ending tries to play Chris as sort of the emotional crux of the film, and that doesn't work when you have made a deliberate joke out of the fact that these two don't really have that much in common. Now, the person you really gotta talk about when you're talking about It's Pat is one Mr. Charles Rocket. Charles Rocket is an actor who does not get enough credit. He died tragically young, actually. And he was not in a lot. He's in Earth Girls Are Easy. He's the boyfriend in that. And in this movie, he plays a guy who moves in right across from Pat. And the main plot of the movie, and much like Stuart Saves His Family, when I say that, I mean it is the most recurring plot thread. It's not really the plot of the movie. But the most recurring plot thread is Charles Rocket just becoming obsessed with figuring out Pat's gender. And it works! Like it's hilarious, and it's like, yeah, that's what an It's Pat movie should be about. And unfortunately, they've got all this other bullshit out in the wings, and you know, Pat, terrible character, does not work. But this main thread of Charles Rocket just going insane trying to figure out Pat's gender, it works! It's like, this could be a good movie, and it's not!
That's all? The most intimate record of every detail of Pat's life and not a single clue about Pat's sex?
Allegedly, I have no evidence to back this up, allegedly, Quentin Tarantino did an uncredited rewrite for this film. This is pre-Pulp Fiction, so he was not a household name at the time. But allegedly he did an uncredited rewrite, and if that's the case, then I attribute all of what works about this plot to Quentin Tarantino. Kathy Griffith is in the movie, playing a character named Kathy Griffith. It doesn't seem to be her. I don't think she's playing herself, because she's playing this, like Frasier-style psychiatrist with a radio talk show, which Pat comes in and co-opts with terrible advice, because Pat is a terrible person. Also, I'm like 80-90% sure it's the exact same radio station from Airheads. I can't confirm that, but I'm like pretty sure it's the same radio station from Airheads. They just reused a set from a previous film. Shout out to the movie Airheads. Probably the best comedy that Sandler has ever been in. At one point in this film, Pat films a music video with the band Ween. You guys remember Ween? Probably a lot of younger viewers don't, actually. Of course, this is pretty much just a setup for Pat to make the joke, "Oh, guys, I played with Ween! Ha ha ha! It sounds like penis." It's Pat is a fascinating movie, because the main plot is, like, kind of brilliant, but a lot of the other, like, all the other stuff sucks so bad that it drags this movie all the way down. But, you know, that shit with Charles Rocket, that's definitely putting it above Stewart Saves His Family. So, props? Moving on.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
Blues Brothers 2000. So, in 1998, Dan Aykroyd and John Landis had both gone without a hit for a while, actually. Neither of them were doing well career-wise, and I guess they just figured, like, hey, fuck it. Let's make a Blues Brothers sequel. Especially since, like, Lorne Michaels had already sorta, like, he had stepped away from SNL to start making these movies, and it's like, well, you know, he's making these movies. Let's make another Blues Brothers movie. Why not? It's such an odd movie, because on the one hand, it feels a lot more grounded than the original Blues Brothers, and on the other hand, it does stuff that is so weird that the original Blues Brothers never would have done it. And those two things combined just sort of react in a horrible way. Like, it doesn't work as a sequel, and it doesn't work on its own. Like, Blues Brothers was weird and wild and over the top and did all sorts of crazy shit. Blues Brothers 2000 starts off like it's gonna be a more normal movie, like it's gonna be a more conventional movie, because there's really not anything like Blues Brothers. Like, it exists in a universe all its own, and Blues Brothers 2000 does a much worse job establishing that universe. But then you get to the end of the movie, and you've got, like, a voodoo queen who's turning the Blues Brothers into zombies and rats, and it's like... What? Like, this... It's too weird to have happened in the original Blues Brothers, and yet here it is in this film that feels like it should be a lot more grounded. At least based on, like, everything that's happened up to that point. Now, I'm gonna give it some credit. I'm gonna be nice and talk about the nice things about this movie. For one thing, the music's great. Like, there's just... the music's just great. Like, at least they got that right. Because the music in Blues Brothers is also fucking great. So it's like, yeah, if you fucked up the music, you don't have a Blues Brothers movie. Like, you gotta get the music right. The other thing is that this, of course, came out after John Belushi's death. So he had to be replaced. And in his stead, we have John Goodman. And I think that really works. Like, the tiny-brained take would be to get, like, Jim Belushi to do this. But I think by getting John Goodman, they make it very clear that they're not trying to replace John Belushi. Because John Goodman is an actor with a legacy all his own. In fact, this very same year, he was in one of my favorite movies of all time, Big Lebowski. So, by putting John Goodman in the secondary role, it's like, yeah, John Goodman is an established actor with his own stuff going on. We're not trying to replace John Belushi. We're getting someone else. We're going a different direction with this character. And yeah, that's a good thing to do. Do not try to replace John Belushi. Find someone else. Just find someone who has, like, screen charisma and make a new character. And they did it. I think they did a good job, you know, getting someone to fill in to fill the hole John Belushi left behind. I think John Goodman was a good choice for this movie. So good work on that one. I cannot compliment much else about the film. Most of it feels like either a limp rehash of something we saw in the first movie, or is just bad. Which is true of a lot of sequels, actually. Especially sequels that come out 18 years after the original. I do also want to highlight that this film is called Blues Brothers 2000, but it came out in 98, so... This film also features a very literal Deus Ex Machina. They end up at this, like, big tent revival run by James Brown's character from the first movie, just so they can bring James Brown back. Not that I'm complaining, I fucking love James Brown, but still, it's like, yeah, okay, you're doing this because he was in the first movie, come on. So they're at this big tent revival, and the cop that's been chasing them the whole movie, who's like the son of Cab Calloway, he rolls up and sees the Blues Brothers, and he's about to, like, arrest them. And then he literally is, like, lifted up out of the tent by God and turned into a Blues Brother. And like the first movie, The first movie kind of had this with John Belushi's character. He sees God in this church and he decides, yeah, we're gonna save the orphanage. But in that movie, it happens at the beginning of the movie, first off, and it's what kickstarts the plot. And even then, it's a lot more subdued. It's just like a beam of light hitting John Belushi. So you could easily interpret it as him just deciding he saw God, and whether or not it was actually God is a little ambiguous. In this movie, it has to be God. First off, it is absolutely God. And second off, it happens in the middle of the movie as sort of a plot convenience. It's just like a way to get this character on the Blues Brothers side. It feels like a real cop-out. It feels like a Deus Ex Machina, because it literally is God coming down and intervening. What else is there to say about Blues Brothers 2000? It's not good. It's not good.
Live from New York, it is Saturday night!
The Ladies' Man, starring Tim Meadows. I have the library DVD right here. I had library DVDs of some of these, but I had to return all of them. This is the only one I still have on me. Now, I love Tim Meadows, and I think it's unfortunate that he hasn't been able to be the leading man in a movie. He often takes up side roles, and he's always great in them. Like, I love him in, like, everything he has done as a side character. This movie might be the reason he doesn't really get work as a leading man. Honestly, the one and only reason I have this ranked higher than Blues Brothers 2000 is that Blues Brothers 2000 is a disappointing sequel to a movie I love, where Ladies' Man is like an original movie. So that's... And there is one moment in the film that I'm like, okay, this I think makes it better than Blues Brothers 2000. Interestingly, it's a musical number. Just like randomly, like halfway through the film, there's a random-ass musical number. And it is very funny, actually. There's like this organization of guys who are after Tim Meadows' character for fucking their wives. Just a whole gang of guys whose wives have fucked Tim Meadows. So they burst out into this big old musical number about how they're gonna kill him. This movie is so weird because it like hits this very low level, not very funny comedy level, and apart from the musical number, nothing they try moves it from this very mediocre comedy movie. Even cameos from exceptionally talented comedians. There are some really funny people in this movie. Eugene Levy's in it. Oh, fuck, who was the mailman? The mailman was really funny, too. Julianne Moore shows up as a sexy clown girl. None of it improves the movie. Well, okay, seeing Julianne Moore as a sexy clown girl improves it a little, but not in terms of comedy, just in terms of, I got to see Julianne Moore. And it's just like, how? How do you have this much talent on your movie, and it doesn't help? It just bounces off the movie like it's nothing. It's like, ha, you think a good comedian might improve this film? Will Ferrell plays the leader of the gang of guys that's coming to kill Tim Meadows, and the joke with him is that he's gay. That's it. It's at every single time it's like, huh, Will Ferrell's gay. You get it? He's gay? I will give it, like, the tiniest modicum of respect, because they do have Tim Meadows just fucking call it out at the end of the movie, which was rare for the time. Like, this was a very common joke in the late 90s, early 2000s. It's just like, specifically with Will Ferrell, too. It happened with other comedians. But it happened a lot with Will Ferrell. A lot of it was Will Ferrell, where they're just like, Will Ferrell's gay. That's the joke. That's the whole joke. And to their credit, Tim Meadows calls it out at the end of the movie. He's like, and you, well, man, you're just gay. I don't know what to say about that. And it's like, okay, well, at least they acknowledged that they were doing the joke. Oh, Kevin McDonald. Kevin McDonald was the mailman. Lee Evans plays a guy whose wife has just recently had sex with Tim Meadows' character. And he is trying to be the Charles Rocket of this movie, and it's not really working for him. Because, like I said, talent just bounces off of this movie. And I'm not even convinced Lee Evans is all that talented. I mean, he tries. He puts his heart and soul into this, and it does nothing. It does not improve the film at all. So about 20 minutes into this film, I'm like, okay, this is a film about a guy with a lispy voice who loses his public access program and has to scramble to keep his life together. This is the black version of Stuart Saves His Family. What more do I have to say? That just summarizes the ladies, man. It's Stuart Saves His Family for black people, and instead of self-help, it's sex. Which, granted, makes for a funnier movie, but not that much funnier because, you know, sex jokes are a little overdone. I watched this the week after I watched Night at the Roxbury, and Tim Meadows reads a poem he wrote in this, and it starts with the line, "What is love?" And I'm immediately like, no, got enough of that last week, man, no thanks. Now, this movie stands out as arguably the end of an era. Now, in 1980, you had Blues Brothers, and nothing followed that up until 1990, when Wayne's World got released. And then there's about a 10-year stretch between Wayne's World and The Ladies' Man, where all these SNL movies got released. And Ladies' Man was the last one for 10 years before they made MacGruber. And MacGruber feels like a film that they had plans for, that they're like, yeah, we actually want to make this. This isn't just us chasing a trend. So, in a sense, Ladies' Man is the end of a stretch of SNL movies we got in the 90s. It ran from Wayne's World to this movie. And Blues Brothers and MacGruber are sort of the outliers. So, this killed SNL movies. And when you can kill a franchise of films that includes It's Pat and Stuart Saves His Family, yeah, you fucked up.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more. Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more.
What's what you're saying? So is Johnny Depp meeting you here, or what?
Is Jim Carrey meeting you here? Night at the Roxbury is based on a sketch where Will Ferrell, Chris Kattan, and Jim Carrey jam out to What Is Love while trying to pick up chicks. What a setup for a movie! They don't even beat around the bush. The movie opens with What Is Love? They play it one other time pretty early on, and then there's a Muzak version when they're in an elevator. And then Chris Kattan shows up to play it on like a boombox, Love Actually style, to get Will Ferrell to come back, and you're like, okay, well, like, this is the climax of the film. Of course they're gonna play it here. They play it 2 more times before the end of the movie. In the movie. Like, not, like, over the end credits. To be fair, it starts playing in the movie, and that leads into the end credits, but it's still, like, diegetic. They still hear it. In fact, the joke this movie goes out on is Will Ferrell saying he's sick of the song. In Night at the Roxbury, Will Ferrell and Chris Kattan play these two kind of douchey brothers who go around to clubs and try to pick up women, and they get mistaken for, like, two super rich guys by these two girls who are like I ain't saying they're gold diggers, but they ain't messing with no broke brokes. Well, actually, they are messing with broke brokes. Sitcom misunderstanding leads them to believe that these two characters are actually extremely wealthy. And, again, this is a film that feels like a worse version of Wayne's World. Like, these two feel like... It feels like with very little effort you could slot Wayne and Garth into this movie instead of Will Ferrell and Chris Kattan. I'll grant you, Will Ferrell, I shit on him sometimes, but he can be funny when he does it right. Like, there is... I will not deny the comedy of Will Ferrell. He is a funny actor when he tries. He just doesn't try a lot. Chris Kattan, really funny. Fucking hilarious. Love him. Love the man. I only say that because he has not made nearly as many terrible movies as Will Ferrell. Honestly, the two are probably pretty equal in terms of comedy. Like, they are both very funny actors. They're both pretty funny in this. Or they try to be. The script... Here's the thing. The script sucks. But they... elevated a little bit. Like, you'll notice we're getting to, like, the middle of the list here, and it's like, yeah, this one wasn't the worst. I was okay with this movie. It's not good, it's not bad. It just sort of is. This film was brought to us by the brilliant visionary who brought you Fred 2, Night of the Living Fred. Just wanted to point that out. Fuck, man, I'm, like, really at a loss for words to talk about Night at the Rock. It's a movie based on the sketch where Will Ferrell and Chris Kattan go. Of course it's not gonna be a very good movie. Of course I'm not gonna have much to say about it. It's like the entire joke is that they jam out to What Is Love and strike out with chicks. And striking out with chicks is not really a new thing. That was like the thing everyone did in the 90s. That was like the plot of Beavis and Butthead, a show that ran for like 8 seasons. I guess I'll mention that Molly Shannon and Will Ferrell like get together in this film. They start dating in this film, which is a little ironic because they also do that in the movie that came immediately after this, or no, immediately after. Yeah, immediately after this. I think I fucked up when I was talking about the ladies, man. I said I had watched Night at the Roxbury the week before. It was actually 2 weeks before because Superstar was in the middle there. Molly Shannon and Will Ferrell also get together in Superstar, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. Which, I guess is gonna be pretty soon, because I've run out of things to say about Night at the Roxbury. It's not very good, but, then again, it's not the worst. Baby, don't hurt me.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
Wayne's World 2 is not as bad a sequel as Blues Brothers 2000. Probably because it came out only a few years after Wayne's World. It's still not a very good sequel. I mean, honestly, like I've said, like, a lot of these SNL films felt like Wayne's World but worse. But that is exactly how to describe Wayne's World 2. it's Wayne's World, but a little bit worse. I mean, part of it is that the whole thing feels like such a rehash of the first Wayne's World. I'm gonna move this a little to the left. For aesthetic purposes. Look at me. I'm Wes Anderson. It feels like a rehash of the first Wayne's World. It's like, okay, yeah, I've already seen this done before, and frankly, it was done better in Wayne's World. And if you really pressed me, I might be hard to articulate why it doesn't work as well as Wayne's World without doing, like, a side-by-side comparison. Like, it's not immediately obvious why this is worse than Wayne's World 1. But, like, just watching it, you get the sense of, like, yeah, this is Wayne's World, but worse. Like, it's a rehash of the first film, but slightly worse somehow. It doesn't have, like, the energy the first movie did. And I guess that's to be expected with a rehash. I guess that's why people don't really like rehashes of the first movie, because it's almost never done as well as it was in the first movie. Like, the first movie, you're doing it for the first time, it all comes, like, naturally, it's spontaneous. And when you do it the second time, it's like, well, okay, what did we do the first time? Let me stiffly and awkwardly recreate what we did the first time. Let's try to capture that lightning in a bottle twice, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It doesn't even have a cameo to rival Alice Cooper's cameo in the first film. It's just... I don't know, it's just the lamer version of Wayne's World. If you've seen Wayne's World, don't even bother with this movie. It's just the lamer version of Wayne's World, which, you know, is already the lamer version of Bill and Ted. I wore my Bill and Ted shirt because I'm like, surely I have one shirt in my collection that's a movie that has some prominent SNL alum, and I couldn't find one. I have my Garfield Evangelion shirt because it's like, Bill Murray was Garfield, but I don't know, that shirt's a reference to Garfield and Friends, which doesn't have Bill Murray in it. And I also have a Spinal Tap shirt, and I'm like, well, technically Michael McKean was a cast member for, like, a season, but no one remembers him for SNL. He was famous long before he was a cast member on SNL, so I don't think anyone would have gotten Spinal Tap either. He might be in Coneheads, but that would be the only one of these movies he's in. So I'm like, we'll do Bill and Ted, because they're, like, sort of like Wayne and Garth, you know? Here's the thing, I've done my research on this. Bill and Ted was filmed in 1988. And then between them finishing filming and the film actually being released is when Mike Myers and Dana Carvey started doing Wayne's World. So neither one ripped off the other. Just coincidentally, two different people decided to do these parodies of, like, like West Coast Valley dudes from the late 80s, early 90s. I like Bill and Ted better for a variety of reasons, but mainly because their movie is about them time traveling, which is way more interesting than what they do in Wayne's World. And, unlike Wayne's World, their sequel, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, is actually really good. I like Bogus Journey. I don't like Wayne's World 2. Wayne's World 2, not as good as Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. That should tell you about as much as you need to know. Moving on to a very special section.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night.
So, there are two movies that could kinda count as SNL movies, but that I have decided to exclude from the rankings. The first is the Mike Judge film Office Space. Now, Office Space is based on some animated shorts Mike Judge made back in the early 90s, which got licensed out to a variety of TV programs, including Saturday Night Live, who ran them in their animation corner that they had for a brief time in the mid-90s. It got forgotten very quickly because most of the animations sucked. But it did feature the Mike Judge sketches upon which Office Space is based. So technically, Office Space is based on sketches that appeared on Saturday Night Live. Now, I'm not counting it because those sketches were not made for Saturday Night Live. They were made long before they appeared on Saturday Night Live. They appeared on several other shows. But technically, yes, Office Space is based on sketches that appeared on Saturday Night Live. If this movie were on the list, it would be at number 1. I fucking love this movie. This is like, no joke, one of my favorite movies. Top 5 religious films for sure. Honestly, people are like, oh, Office Space, it's so funny, it's so hilarious, and like, I think it's funny. I get a good laugh out of this film. But honestly, I love this movie because it's like the most based movie I have ever seen. Like, this just lays bare what it is like to be working class in America, and I just love it for that. I love its bold stance of, regardless of how hard I work, I'm gonna get the same wage at the end of the day, so fuck it. Just a brilliant, brilliant movie. I love Office Space so much. Listen, I love Blues Brothers as well. It's a great movie. It's one of my favorites. It's not Office Space. Like, these are both 10 out of 10 movies. But Office Space is the better 10 out of 10 movie. The other movie I want to bring up is Mr. Mike's Mondo Video. This is a sketch comedy from one of the original writers on SNL, and also features most of the original cast. Dan Aykroyd, Bill Murray, Gilda Radner, they're all in it. So it's arguable. It's Saturday Night Live adjacent. In fact, it was even advertised as like the sketches we can't show on TV. It's sort of a parody of Mondo movies, which is an odd subgenre that sprung up in the 60s. Mondo is the Italian word for world, although they have a recurring joke in this movie of, like, asking what Mondo means, and it's like, well Mondo means world, but, you know, it's fair enough to not know that, like, in the 60s and this came out in 79. It's fair enough not to know that in the late 70s. Mondo films were basically like a style of documentary that went around the world, filming all these shocking, horrifying rituals from around the world. And Mr. Mike's Mondo Video sort of parodies that by showing weird rituals going on mostly in suburban America. I don't even think you have to have a great understanding of what Mondo films are to enjoy this. As long as you know what a Mondo film is, you should be able to understand the premise. One of the top reviews for this film on Letterboxd calls it subgenius-y, which is a weird way to describe a film, but like, yeah, this is a film that very much hits that same vein that the Church of the Subgenius did. Like, this would fit in very well with the filmography of Church of the Subgenius founder Ivan Stang. So, yeah, it's a film that's gonna have a pretty narrow audience, but I am very much a part of that audience. I thought this movie was hilarious. I really enjoyed it. In particular, I enjoy the sketch where Dan Aykroyd is the leader of this church that worships Jack Lord, the actor from Hawaii Five-0, the one famous for saying, "Book 'em, Dano." So, that's a good sketch. There's a lot of really funny sketches in this, though. Not all of it, I think, hits, but, like, you know, a lot of it I think is really funny, so if you have my comedic sensibilities, you might enjoy Mr. Mike's Mondo video. Weirdly, this film, like, promotes itself with, like, oh, featuring Sid Vicious. Sid Vicious has a role in the movie. And Sid Vicious of the Sex Pistols, famously. And his scene in the film is clearly the scene from The Great Rock and Roll Swindle where he sings My Way, except they've cut the audio and they put this text up on screen that says, like, oh, the original owners of My Way would not let us show Sid Vicious's version of My Way, which is really funny if you've seen his version of My Way, but that requires the context of having seen him sing My Way in the film Great Rock and Roll Swindle, which came out a year after this film. And also a year after Sid Vicious's death, incidentally. Actually, the filming of that scene is famously in the film Sid and Nancy, because it ends with him shooting a bunch of audience members, including a cameo from his beautiful girlfriend Nancy, who he would go on to murder. In a mild defense of Sid Vicious, I will say that he died before he could ever be convicted of that, and also if he did it, he was probably really strung out on drugs when he did it. But also, fuck the guy. So, that whole sequence is weird, because it's like, it seems like Mr. Mike must have been in with someone working on, Great Rock and Roll Swindle in order for him to get that footage, but it's better in Great Rock and Roll Swindle, which is weird, because I'd much rather rewatch Mr. Mike's Mondo video than Great Rock and Roll Swindle. That movie is nigh on incomprehensible. Mr. Mike's Mondo video is also a tad incomprehensible, but that's deliberate. Although, I guess you could argue it's also deliberate in Great Rock and Roll Swindle, I don't know. Point being, the scene doesn't really work in this film, even though it's the better movie. So yeah, I kinda recommend Mr. Mike's Mondo video. It's funny. I suppose I'll also take this break in format to talk about the show upon which these movies are based, Saturday Night Live. Now, Saturday Night Live is a film that has been running since the late 70s, so there's very little I can say about it that hasn't already been said. A lot of people sort of bemoan that SNL is not as good as it used to be. But here's the thing, SNL has always had its ups and downs. Like, it's fine that SNL is in a down point right now. It's bounced back from worse. Like, nothing SNL has done currently is worse than the season where they had fucking... Fuck, I just completely blanked on his name. Robert Downey Jr., Iron Man. He was in a season of SNL, and it is widely considered to be the worst season of SNL. I don't think what they're doing now is worse than that. And also, a lot of people when they make this argument tend to go like, oh, SNL hasn't been good since the 90s. And I disagree. SNL hasn't been good since the early 2010s. Probably about the time Andy Samberg left the show. When Andy Samberg left the show, that's when it started going downhill. And honestly, I think SNL suffered a lot during the Trump presidency because, A, Donald Trump as a president so fucking insane that it's like, how do you lampoon this? How do you lampoon this other than just saying the things Trump actually said? Now, you might parody his policies, but then people might start to catch on that there's not much substantive difference between Trump's policies and the policies of most liberal presidents. Plus, like, if Trump says something funny on Wednesday, by the time the show airs on Saturday, every good joke about the thing he said has already been tweeted. And that's really the thing that makes me question the future of Saturday Night Live. It's been an American institution since the late 70s, so it's gonna be hard to kill, but I feel like it doesn't do a great job of competing with the internet. Like, a lot of what's on YouTube is sketch comedy. There's a lot of sketch comedy on YouTube, so they've already got to compete with that. Plus, they've got to compete with, like, whatever political jokes people are making on Twitter, so, and other social media sites, and it's like, I don't know, maybe this is the era where SNL dies, and maybe it's not. Maybe SNL's reign continues another 100 years. May they live as long as they can. But, I don't know how the show can compete with the internet. Maybe it'll surprise me, but I have my doubts. And honestly, like, Lorne Michaels is getting up in years, and the show is still widely seen as bad. I feel like if Lorne Michaels dies before the show can find its footing in the internet era, it's dead, right? Like, if Lorne Michaels dies, we have, like, one season of SNL left before the show also dies. Now that's not true if they can find a way to, like, bounce back. If they can find their footing, if they can become a great show in the era of the internet, I think they could survive Lorne Michaels' death. But as it is now, like, if Lorne Michaels drops dead the day I post this, SNL is also dead. Anyways, that's where I'm at with the show. I think a lot of the old stuff is funny. There's a lot of classic comedy to it. It hasn't been good probably since, like, 2014, 2015, and that's a lot longer ago than you want to admit.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night.
Boy, you people sure know how to suck it back, don't you?
Coneheads is a really weird sketch to be making a movie of because the sketches started, like, way back. That's, like, early SNL stuff. Like, most of these SNL movies were based on sketches that were still fairly recent when the movies came out. Coneheads was an old-ass sketch that they revived for this movie. Although, to be fair, one of the more reasonable things to recycle for a movie, I guess. In it, the Coneheads have to adapt to life on Earth until they can return to their home planet. And we do actually get to see their home planet, and it's a little Star Wars prequel-y. Maybe I'm just saying that because there's a lot of CG, but, like, it reminds me a little bit of the Star Wars prequels, and in particular, It reminds me of that bootleg figure that decided to name K.A. Mundy Conehead. So it's like, ah, yes, this is K.A. Mundy's home planet. He has good relations with the Wookiees. No, wait, Yoda has good relations with the Wookiees. K.A. Mundy is concerned about the droid attack on the Wookiees. This movie is so weird. Like, I get that, like, part of the joke with the Coneheads is it's like, haha, they're such weird alien things. They have such weird anatomy. But this movie, like, borders on body horror. Like, this is a body horror movie.
You? I? A young one?
Affirmative.
What's really funny is there's a scene where the Conehead's daughter, like, inhales a Subway sandwich, and it's so obviously CG. Like, it's a terrible effect. But then, any scene where Dan Aykroyd is required to eat a whole bunch of food, it's clear that he is actually eating that food. I, too, love to consume mass quantities. Chris Farley plays, Connie's love interest. That's their daughter, Connie Conehead. And Chris Farley plays her love interest, and he does a pretty good job, honestly. Another thing I like about this movie is it does the old comedy trope of making the first few minutes of your film feel like a legitimate installment of the genre you're parodying, as if people don't remember what movie they started watching. Conehead certainly has its fair share of laughs. It's far from a perfect film. I don't know that I would recommend it to anybody, but it's fine. I don't hate it. We're moving on.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
Superstars! The story of Mary Catherine Gallagher. A young lady going to a Catholic church who's sort of a cinephile. She rewinds the tapes at the local Blockbuster and takes inspiration from them. She and Will Ferrell discuss their, like, top 18 straight or made-for-TV movies, and I'm like, ah, finally, characters who have a top 20 made-for-TV movies. These are characters I can relate to. Her thing is that she's, like, super into boys. She really wants to be kissed by a boy, specifically by Will Ferrell, who's, like, the hottest boy in school. And I gotta say, I think it's really funny that all these actors that are, like, clearly in their late 30s are playing high school students. Because that's just what happens in high school. It'll be like, yeah, I'm a high school student, and the dude will be, like, my age. Like, someone who looks like me will roll up and be like, yeah, how do you do, fellow kids? I sure like being in high school. But, of course, it's the age-old trope of, like, she wants the popular boy, and then the boy she really wants has been in front of her the whole time. And the one she really wants who's been in front of her the whole time is Harland Williams of Dahmer vs. Gacy and Big Money Hustlers fame. For movies people on my channel might recognize. I did a fucking interview with the director of a movie he is in. What the fuck? And what's really funny is, like, the thing with Harland Williams' character is, like, everyone thinks he, like, killed his parents or something, so he doesn't talk the whole movie. And I'm like, okay, they're definitely gonna do a joke of when he starts talking, he has Harlan Williams' voice. Because I know what Harlan Williams sounds like. I know he has a very funny voice. So, I saw the joke coming, only because I knew who the actor was, but I saw the joke coming. Apart from Harlan Williams, you also have Tom Green in this movie. Early Tom Green appearance in Superstar. And also, there's a dude in this movie, fuck if I can remember his name, it's this name, this is his name, who looks so much like Jamie Kennedy. I'm like I was scrolling through IMDb and I'm like, where's Jamie Kennedy? Why don't they have Jamie Kennedy listed for this film? That must be some kind of glitch. This guy's clearly played by Jamie Kennedy. And then finally I figured out who the actor actually was, and I clicked on his IMDb profile. It turns out he's in another movie I've seen. Let me see if I can find it. There it is. Suck. He's in the movie Suck. And when I saw this, I also thought he was Jamie Kennedy. I'm like, wait, hold on. I didn't know Jamie Kennedy was in this movie. And then I looked it up and I'm like, oh, it's not Jamie Kennedy. It's just some guy who looks like Jamie Kennedy. Well, he is in Superstar as well. And I also thought he was Jamie Kennedy in Superstar. Because he looks so much like Jamie Kennedy. And my God, what a career to have going around as Discount Jamie Kennedy. Like, of all the actors to be the discount version of fucking Jamie Kennedy, son of the Mask. Also Scream. I love him in Scream, but like, still, I wouldn't want to be the discount version of him. I'll just be the discount version of his character in Scream. This was also the first movie to have a clear marking at the beginning that said SNL Studios. Now, from my research, their first movie was actually Night at the Roxbury. But this had a big SNL Studios logo, as did The Ladies' Man, and then it stopped. The Ladies' Man was the last movie SNL Studios produced. Superstar is a pretty fun movie. There's a lot of funny actors in it that do a good job being funny, including and especially Molly Shannon. I do like Molly Shannon. I think she gets maybe a touch of bad rap. Honestly, she doesn't get much of any rap. People don't really acknowledge Molly Shannon other than to go like, oh look, it's Molly Shannon, but like, she's funny. She's a good actress. I will admit there's like a recurring joke in this movie of like, haha, Molly Shannon's trying to be sexy, and I'm like, here's the problem. Molly Shannon is not ugly enough for that joke to work. Molly Shannon is too hot to be not hot, but she's also not hot enough to just actually be hot, so it's like, you needed a less attractive actress to make this joke work, but it also doesn't work as, like, not a joke. Like, it's very clearly supposed to be a joke, because it's like, haha, it's Molly Shannon we're trying to make sexy, and it's like, well, Molly Shannon's not, like Molly Shannon's, like a little bit hot, but not, like, that hot. So the joke doesn't work at all. I don't know, maybe that's kind of how I feel about the whole film, is like, I mean, kinda, but like, I don't know, not really. Like, it almost works. I certainly got laughs out of it. It's not a horrible movie, but I don't know, I don't love it. It's not a great comedy or anything. It's pretty underwhelming, but I don't know. It's fine.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
Wayne's World, party on, excellent. Yes, it's Wayne's World, the movie that sort of kickstarted all these other SNL movies. And none of them can compare to Wayne's World. Wayne's World is clearly the greatest of the bunch. I don't think Wayne's World is a perfect movie, but it's certainly a very entertaining movie. I think it's worth at least a watch. It's a lot of fun. And honestly, it kind of feels like what an SNL movie should be. It very much captures the sense of humor that Saturday Night Live has, while still committing to, like, a bigger world and a bigger plot. Like, there's a bunch of movie references and fourth wall breaks and whatever, but, like, it still works as a movie. You've got, like, Alice Cooper in there giving one of the greatest cameos in film history.
Do you come to Milwaukee often?
Well, I'm a regular visitor here, but Milwaukee has certainly had its share of visitors. The French missionaries and explorers were coming here as early as the late 1600s to trade with the Native Americans.
In fact, isn't Milwaukee an Indian name?
Yes, Pete, it is. Actually, it's pronounced Milwaukee, which is Algonquin for the good land.
I might argue the greatest cameo in film history. I really love the scene with him. Honestly, it almost feels like a Muppet movie where the Muppets have been replaced with Wayne and Garth. 'Cause there's a bunch of, like, pointless random celebrity cameos, like Chris Farley shows up as a guy who just, like, directs them to a limousine. And that feels like something that would happen in a Muppets movie. One weird thing about this movie is that, like, Wayne gets in with this Chinese girl. I think she's Chinese. I hope I'm getting that right. It's been a little while since I've seen it. By a little while, I mean, like, 10 weeks. But I think she was Chinese, but she mentions learning English through the Police Academy movies.
Where did you learn English?
College. And the Police Academy movies.
And I'm like, oh god, they're referencing the franchise I just finished. And then in Wayne's World 2, they mention Leprechaun.
It kind of reminds me of that movie, The Leprechaun. You remember with that little guy who goes, I'm the leprechaun. Garth, I'm the leprechaun.
Cool it, okay.
So Wayne's World is just committed to referencing all of the franchises I've already talked about on this series. A lot of good posters in this movie. Garth has a poster for Beast of the Yellow Knight, a very obscure movie that I only actually watched because I mistook it for Beast of Yucca Flats, but I showed it to my friends, and it's a Filipino movie where the villain is clearly some, like, evil Filipino god, but in the English version, they just decided he was Satan. So they're just like, oh, Satan. And then it's this fat dude in, like, a necklace and a diaper. And it's like, yeah, that's what Satan looks like. Some fat Asian dude with a moon necklace. That's Satan, right? And then, Wayne is, like, going to visit his girlfriend. And in the background, there's a poster for Hard Rock Zombies. Hell yeah, Hard Rock Zombies. So I have to assume Mr. Mike Myers and Mr. Dana Carvey have exceptionally good taste in movies. In fact, the movie was directed by the same lady who made the Decline of Western Civilization trilogy. And that feels like such a specific choice, because Decline of Western Civilization Part 2, The Metal Years, was a huge hit among metalheads, so it feels like they had to have watched that movie and been like, oh shit, we gotta get this lady to direct our Wayne's World movie. Great director. I highly recommend the Decline of Western Civilization trilogy. And, to a slightly lesser extent, I recommend Wayne's World. It's fun. It's worth a watch. I very much enjoy it. I think it is exactly what a Saturday Night Live movie should be. And it's only topped by 2 things.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
So, earlier in the video, I talked about how the run of SNL movies was largely from 1990 to 2000, and there were 2 outliers. Blues Brothers, which was made 10 years before the trend, and MacGruber, which was 10 years after the trend. And those are the 2 best movies based on SNL characters. Amazing what happens when you make a movie you actually want to make instead of just cashing in on a trend. Honestly, what really makes MacGruber work as a comedy, because I would say the jokes are pretty hit or miss. It's probably like, I don't know, 70-30, and even that might be generous. It might be closer to like 60-40 in terms of like jokes that work versus jokes that fall flat on their face. But what makes the movie work is their commitment to making it look like a real action movie. This whole movie looks like a real action movie, where I feel like so many comedies sort of cheap out. It's like, oh, well, it's a comedy. It doesn't matter. We'll make it look cheap and that's fine. Not MacGruber. MacGruber's like, no, this will look like a real action movie.
Beautiful. Have you ever been to D.C.? No, sir, I haven't. I was talking to the missile.
And you know what's crazy? MacGruber is like blatantly a parody of MacGyver. This is better than any MacGyver movie could be. If they made a MacGyver movie, it would be worse than MacGruber. Here's the weird thing. If I had to stack MacGruber up against any other movie I've talked about for drunk rankings, it would be number 1. It would be the best movie I've discussed on drunk rankings so far. I don't even know what second place would be. Maybe like Ernest Goes to Camp or Leprechaun 4 in Space. Those are the only 2 that stand out to me as like even potentially the best movie I've talked about. MacGruber is better than both those movies, and it's still not at the top of this list. So, to reiterate my point, yeah, SNL movies run the full gambit of quality. Quite ironically, the movie opens with them going to see MacGruber, and the chief is like, rumor has it he's been dead for 10 years. And, like, obviously this is an action movie cliche they're referencing, but it's kind of hilarious. Like there's, like, a hilarious meta joke to it, because at this point, SNL movies had been dead for 10 years. It had been 10 years since Ladies' Man came out, and so this was the climactic comeback of SNL movies. Thank God this did not start a trend. Thank God this was an isolated movie. Because this movie is good. In fact, this movie is so good, I would actively... Like, this is one of the few movies I've watched for drunk rankings that I'm like, I would watch this again in a heartbeat. I really enjoyed this movie. This movie was really funny. I lost my point. I completely lost my point. I forgot what I was even talking about. Oh, boy, I'm reaching too drunk to function levels. We better move on and finish off this list before I am just completely gone.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night.
At number 1, we have Blues Brothers. This is not a surprise. Blues Brothers was always going to be number 1 on this list, unless I counted Office Space. There's just no competing with it. It's a great movie. It's a great movie. It's one of my favorite movies. This is a 10 out of 10 film. If you have not seen Blues Brothers, holy shit, watch Blues Brothers. I'll admit, there's stuff in this film that if a lesser movie did it, I would criticize. I'd be like, that's, like, it clearly doesn't make sense. That's clearly, like, contradictory to the continuity of the film so far. Blues Brothers doesn't give a shit. Blues Brothers is busy being the coolest movie ever made. That's all it cares about, is being the coolest movie ever made. And goddamn if it doesn't succeed. I spend a lot of time on this channel talking about, like, metal movies and the most metal movies ever made. This feels like, you know, the way I talk about something like Deathgasm, where it's like, it's like taking all of the cliches of metal and melting them into a movie. Blues Brothers does that to blues. It's like, let's take all the cliches of blues and melt that into one movie. Is this the obvious pick for number 1? Yes. Yes, this is the obvious pick for number 1. And there's a very good reason for that. This movie is amazing. This is a great fucking movie. I love Blues Brothers so much. I've just admitted that I'm a little past the point where I am capable of talking about movies coherently. But, you know, Blues Brothers is a movie that has been talked about by everyone. Everyone loves this movie. This movie is one of the most highly regarded films of all time, and it absolutely deserves that position because it's hilarious, it's amazing, it's an absolute marvel of filmmaking. If you haven't seen Blues Brothers, holy shit, watch Blues Brothers. I do not have the capacity to gush about Blues Brothers any further. Like, anything else I'm gonna say is just gonna be, Blues Brothers is so cool. Blues Brothers is such a great movie. I really love Blues Brothers. We should watch Blues Brothers. Let's watch Blues Brothers! This is such a good movie! Let's watch Blues Brothers, man! What else is there to say? It's fucking Blues Brothers. Of course it was gonna be at number 1. There is not a single universe where this does not make number 1. And that's all of the SNL movies ranked from worst to best. If you enjoyed this video, obviously follow me on Twitter at Matt_presents, where I drunk tweet these movies live, as well as a bunch of movies that never even make it into drunk ranking videos. Just like independent movies, unattached movies, I should say, since independent movies means something else. Unattached movies that I just drunk tweet because, like, hey, it's a bad movie that's gotten popular. Probably around the time this goes up, I'm gonna be drunk tweeting Morbius. Morbius summer, y'all. Jesus, I gotta hurry up. It is getting dark out. I'm using natural lighting, in case it wasn't obvious by the fact that it continues to get darker. Although, it's still pretty light outside and I'm pretty dark, so maybe I should just turn up the exposure. So, yeah, I got a few movies I'm gonna drunk tweet before I start my next series. Also, I'm probably gonna take a week or 2 off. I am going out of town pretty soon. But, when I come back, I will be drunk tweeting the Wrong Turn movies. Yeah, that horror franchise from the 2000s about all the crazy inbreds. I know I set up for a Bring It On drunk rankings, and that's still gonna happen. I'm I'm holding off on that one a little while longer. Right now, I'm thinking Wrong Turn is the move for Drunk Rankings. So next time you hear from me, the next time you see a Drunk Rankings video, I suppose, it'll be the Wrong Turn franchise. Until then, have a great day. I am very drunk. Look at that. Look at how far I got in that bottle. That's like more than halfway through.